Passing by the blind date corner of the park, I found the boss information on the wall. I excitedly squeezed into the crowd, took a photo and sent it to my boss, gloating, "Boss, blind date." The boss circled a corner of the photo and replied, "Aren't you too? When did my mom do it? It's a shame to be thrown home." Anna Wild, 27 years old, 1.6 meters tall, beautiful and gentle, can go up to the hall and down the kitchen. Is this me? Obviously the goods are not right. I looked at my resume, the corners of my mouth twitched, and then I quickly tore off my piece of paper, crumpled it into a paper ball, and threw it into the trash. I have to talk to my mother when I go back, and I can just recruit relatives and put such an ugly photo. Then I raised my hand, and saw a text message from Conrad, "Help me tear it off, thank you." I stood aside, glanced at his picture again, bit my lip, and giggled and replied, "Boss, you're actually pretty handsome on the wall." Conrad. I was startled by a sudden phone call. My hands trembled, and I quickly picked it up, and before I could speak, I heard a deep voice from the other side, "Anna Wild, I remember you've been late twice this month. Do you know this? I'm always ahead of him." Despicable and shameless. Actually threatened me. Do I look like such a spineless person? Oh, I am. Who can live with money? For the sake of my dear Quankin, I immediately changed my words and apologized, but my brain twitched. "Oh, boss, it's still a little ugly for you to stay on the wall, so tear it off." As soon as the words ended, I realized what I was talking about and changed my words again and again. I'll tear it off for you." There were 2 laughs from the other side. "Okay, I know. And then it hangs." I let out a breath and walked over to the Conrad material, reaching for a corner of the paper to tear it off, when a voice stopped me halfway through. "Girl, is this a fancy for you?" The aunt next to her smiled. "This young man is very good, he is young, has a successful career, and is filial to his parents. I am optimistic that many families will take a fancy to this child." I was stunned. "Hey, a lot of them. It seems that the boss market is good. So why are you still single? It seems that the follow-up development is not good." The aunt was still saying, "I know his mother, why don't you get in touch?" After speaking, he took out his mobile phone from his pocket and prepared to make a call. "I'll tell his mother, she lives nearby and will come over soon." I immediately panicked. How could I tear up the information and bring it to the parents? I'm not responsible for doing this. I just want to tear the paper off and protect my full attendance. I immediately grabbed my aunt's hand to stop her. Auntie looked at me puzzled. I swallowed a mouthful of water, my eyes blinking, and both of us froze at the moment. "Pregnant." I had a flash of inspiration and found an excuse. "Auntie, no need, I'm his girlfriend. I happened to see it, and I wanted to tear it off for him." "Girlfriend?" Auntie was stunned, frowned and thought before asking, "Why haven't I heard that Conrad is in love?" When it was over, I wanted to cover my face. "Leave me alone." My mind was racing, and suddenly I became aggrieved, tears rolling wildly in my eyes. "Auntie, Conrad and I have broken up, so he hasn't had time to talk to his mom yet." Tears rolled down his cheeks, and his voice became more and more pitiful, a handful of snot and tears. "It's just that I still love him, and I don't want to see him with other girls, so I want to tear it off. Auntie, I'm so sad, I really love him." The more I acted, the more I got into the play, and I cried heartbreakingly. My aunt panicked, quickly took out a tissue from her bag, and handed it to me, patted me on the back and comforted, "Child, it's okay, everything will pass." TSK, good acting. After successfully fooling my aunt, I made an excuse and managed to escape. After seeing my aunt leave, I went back and tore off the boss information, and stuffed it into my bag. "Keep it well, this is my 500 yuan full work." It wasn't until I went to work the next morning that my mom replied to me, "You're 27 years old, I'm anxious for you if you're not in a hurry. If you don't find me a son-in-law at the age of 28, you won't enter this house." I reluctantly put down my phone and sighed. I'm used to seeing my mother's Hedong lion roar. It's just that the texture of the sound is a little different this time. Wait a minute. I suddenly felt bad and looked up to see that everyone in the office was looking at me. They're all laughing at me. My back stiffened. Finished. My headphones aren't connected to Bluetooth. I lowered my head and inserted my fingers into my hair, burying my face in my hands, eager to dig out a basement with my feet, and get myself in. Celeste Russell, who was sitting next to me, gently pushed his elbow against my waist. I looked up, embarrassed. Instead, she motioned for me to look behind me. Suddenly I felt a chill behind me, and I took a deep breath, and turned my head to look. As a result, I felt numb when I saw Tab Conrad look at me, with his hands around me and smile slightly. Smile with a knife. The boss usually doesn't laugh, and if he does, bad luck will happen. This is the conclusion that I and my group have come to for many years in the company. It's over, the full attendance here hasn't been done yet, and I've been deducted from going to work to fish. At this time, it was as if I saw a pile of red Jiminbi leaving me. Anna Wild, come to my office later. His smile suddenly disappeared, and he knocked on my desk with a blank face, turned and walked in the direction of the office. It's over. I want to cry without tears. Celeste Russell patted me sympathetically on the shoulder, and sighed, come on, it's a win. I am still a 27-year-old aspiring young man, the flower of the motherland. How can I not only suffer from the urging of my mother to marry, but also suffer from the oppression of my boss? I stood in the doorway, simulating what I would do, when I got in. Then he took a deep breath, knocked on the office door tremblingly, pushed it open, and then immediately bowed deeply. Boss, I don't dare next time, forgive me. If you admit your mistakes so sincerely, you can't embarrass me anymore, right? How dare I? Tab Conrad put down his pen, and leaned back in his office chair with interest. I failed you. I don't understand. What's going on? I only found out last night that I still have an ex-girlfriend, and I realized that I was so ruthless and easily abandoned the person who loved me so much. At night, my mother criticized me, saying that I had to chase you back anyway, and I must take it home to show her during the May Day holiday. Tab Conrad stood up and looked at me, with a slight raised eyebrow. Anna Wild, how are you going to fill this hole? Finished. Yesterday's play seems to have been played. I twitched the corners of my mouth in distress and asked tentatively, or let's just say that I have a man outside behind your back. I love you for pretending, because I want your money. Tab Conrad, no. He immediately vetoed. Another one. I can't think of it. I unconsciously walked over to the couch and sat down, poured myself a glass of water, and tried to convince him, boss, it's just nominally green, and it's not really green, it's okay. As soon as I finished speaking, I saw two words written in Tab Conrad's eyes. No way. It's still non-negotiable. I was a little helpless, and my tone was mixed with collapse. Boss, I really can't help it. Can't I be your girlfriend, and go home with you, right? I'm fine, but I'm afraid you won't like it. Before I could finish my sentence, I heard the boss suddenly burst out of his mouth. I can. 3 words. As soon as he finished speaking, all the water in my mouth squirted out, and the water choked on my throat, and coughed non-stop. That's a good idea. He pulled out a few pieces of paper and handed them to me. That's it, you can come with me to my house on May Day. I was shocked. That's agreed. How do I feel? A bit of a casual agreement. Suddenly I regretted that my mouth was just talking with my brain. I'm not going to do anything to you. He seemed to think I was scared of him, assured. I've been with Tab Conrad for a few years, and I've long figured out what kind of person he is, and I'm sure he's not going to do anything to me. But I thought that this method would definitely not work, and it was just casual talk, and I didn't have time on May Day. Because my girlfriend and I have made an appointment to go to Yunnan to play, she seems to be looking forward to it. If you don't go, isn't it not good? On one side is the boss, and on the other side is the best girlfriend. I had to ask Tab Conrad to give me time to think about it. As a result, when she went back to video with her best friend, she immediately replied, you go to his house, with Tab Conrad on May Day. Let's go another day, such a great opportunity, we must not miss it. I didn't expect her to be so cheerful, and I wondered, what chance? You're stupid. Chloe yelled, he's Tab Conrad. Tall, handsome, and rich, isn't that rushing? I felt justified, and I just rushed. Of course, because I find it to be a way to make a fortune. I sent a WeChat message and asked, boss, can this be counted as 3 times the salary for overtime during holidays? Tab Conrad, yes. Okay, then I'll go. In response to this exciting overtime pay, I immediately agreed. He had already prepared a gift for going to Tab Conrad's mother's house. Because his mom was staying in City B, Tab Conrad asked me to pack my bags for a day at their house. After I put on my makeup, Tab Conrad came to my door. It should be okay to see your mother like this, right? I spun around in front of him in my pale blue dress, blinking and waiting for his reply. I saw that his eyes were a little evasive, and then he turned his head and mumbled, "How do you feel that the boss is a little weird today?" I didn't think much of it. Tab Conrad carried my luggage, and he helped me open the passenger door, and let me sit in. Along the way, I was inexplicably nervous, and my mind kept simulating what I would do when I arrived at Tab Conrad's house. The more I think about it, the faster my heart beats. Nervous. Tab Conrad seemed to sense my nervousness, and reassured me as he turned the steering wheel. "Relax. It's not like you're seeing a real mother-in-law, and my mother is very talkative." I was so nervous that I couldn't speak. What if it's the real mother-in-law? After saying that, I immediately gagged my mouth. Oh no, I accidentally said everything in my heart. "It's not." Afraid that Tab Conrad would think too much, I quickly explained, "That's not what I meant, boss. I definitely don't think anything wrong about you." Tab Conrad laughed and replied, "Got it." The boss smiled. He seemed to like me taking advantage of him. When we arrived at their yard, his mother was at the door to greet us. Tab Conrad's mom was really nice, and I didn't feel any uncomfortable at the end of the day. I suddenly had an urge to let Mrs. Conrad be my mother-in-law. Such a mother-in-law. The relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law must be very good. In order to maintain my elegant image, I did not dare to eat too much at dinner. "Anna Wild, are you full?" Mrs. Conrad was a little surprised to see me put down her chopsticks. I nodded. "Eat more," Mrs. Conrad advised me. "You're too thin." Although it was delicious, I couldn't help it. I was afraid that I wouldn't control my mouth, and the amount of food was amazing. As a result, when I went to bed, my stomach kept screaming, and I couldn't sleep over and over, and I collapsed a little. The thought of the fragrant meal in the evening brought tears to my eyes. Why didn't I eat more? There was a sudden knock on the door of the room. I got up and opened the door, and I was a little surprised to see the man in front of me. "Boss, are you hungry?" He stood in the doorway in a white shirt, the orange light casting shadows of different shades on him, and the slight bowing posture made his side face look unusually soft. "I think he's kind of a god." "Heh?" Tab Conrad asked again. That's when I came back to my senses. "How can you say that you are hungry?" The bitterness of that night was in vain. I was about to say no, but my stomach answered for me first. Gollum. In this quiet atmosphere, the sound coming from my stomach was particularly noticeable. I looked embarrassed and immediately covered my unassuming stomach. As a result, it screamed louder. If only my feet had the power of an excavator. Tab Conrad's laughter shattered, his chest trembling with the laughter. "All right, I'll cook you noodles. So good." Hearing that there was a late-night snack, I swallowed a mouthful of water, in a frustration, and followed him with a foot. I leaned to the side and watched the boss chop vegetables. The boss personally cooked supper for me, and if I said it, the people in our group would probably envy me. Thinking about it, I couldn't hold back the smile on my lips. He cut the meat, and was about to pour the oil, when he remembered something, turned to me, and said, "Help me get my apron." I nodded hurriedly, took off my apron diligently, and thought that I hadn't helped in any way. So I blurted out a sentence of, "I'll tie it for you." Maybe it was a little ambiguous, but after saying that, both of them were stunned. And then he replied, "Okay." I stood on tiptoe. He bowed his head and bent over. Just when he was around his neck, he was too tall. I didn't stand firmly. The whole person leaned forward, wrapped around his neck, and he also subconsciously held my waist. I am most afraid of the sudden silence of the air. The heat from his snort sprayed down on my neck, and I shuddered as if an electric current was flowing through my body. I could also clearly feel his body stiffening. When I came to my senses, I immediately let go and took a few steps back, my hands behind my back, and I didn't dare to look at him. Tab Conrad coughed lightly to hide his embarrassment, then turned around and continued his work. "You sit in the living room and wait a while. It will be done soon." "Wait a minute," I whispered, gesturing to the rope behind him. "I'll help you tie the rope of your apron first." I reached for the 2 ropes, took them behind him, pulled them lightly, crossed them, and made a bow. Braised noodles with tomato poached eggs. Just smelling it makes me even hungrier. Soon I finished the noodles and touched my stomach, feeling a sense of satisfaction that I had never felt before. Can I leave in 2 days? Conrad broke the silence. His dark eyes met mine, and his voice was extraordinarily gentle. My mom loves you, and wants to spend 2 more days with you. I looked into his eyes, and before I knew it I was hooked, and my heart was beating faster. But I had to try to make myself look calm. I cupped my cheeks, stared at the bowl of noodles I had just eaten, and grinned and joked. So this is a bribe for me? A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Isn't it true that you have a soft mouth and short hands? I pretended to think for a while, and rubbed my cheeks on my cheeks. For the sake of the good taste, I'll keep it for 2 more days. Suddenly remembering something, I leaned forward and propped my elbows on the table, and asked with interest, Boss, if Auntie really likes me, then your future girlfriend will be very troublesome. No, it won't, Conrad replied. So sure. I raised my eyebrows slightly. It's rare to see a girl like me who likes her parents, let alone such a kind, beautiful and generous girl. Conrad didn't say anything. He seemed to be laughing again. In the morning, Conrad and his mom were going to the supermarket to buy groceries and other groceries. I struggled with the bed for a while before I got up, and I went to bed too late yesterday, and noticed that the dark circles under my eyes were particularly noticeable when I washed up. Conrad was a little surprised to see that I had already changed my clothes, and looked like I was going to go out with him. Won't you sleep more? I don't sleep. I shook my head. I'll go with you. Mrs. Conrad seemed to notice the dark circles on my face and asked, Didn't you sleep last night? I'll go back to sleep and I'll just go with Conrad. Then he turned around and scolded Conrad. Young people should also be restrained. You see, Anna Wild was tormented. Conrad. I suddenly seemed to understand something, and my cheeks burned rapidly. No, Auntie, I quickly explained. I was hungry last night, and Conrad cooked me noodles, so we both went to bed late. This solved the misunderstanding. Mrs. Conrad was going to buy other groceries, leaving me and Conrad to wander around the supermarket with our shopping carts. I picked up fruit in the fruit and vegetable section, and asked Conrad to see what to eat for lunch. As soon as I picked up a few apples, and put them in a bag, I looked up and saw a young couple of high school students, who seemed to be still in love, standing opposite me, and hugging each other and kissing each other. Kissed once, twice, 3 times. I was stunned, seeing that the 2 people in front of me were so close. The corners of my mouth couldn't help twitching. This is too abusive. The 2 little couples didn't feel panicked and ashamed when they found out that I was looking at them, but the girl calmly let go of her hand, looked at me and raised her eyebrows slightly, and at the same time raised her chin. Seems to be showing off to me that she has a partner, but I don't. Young man, he actually provoked me. Wait. I grabbed a bag of apples in my hand, and walked in the direction of Conrad, holding his arm against him and shouting, Honey, what shall we eat later? Conrad was very cooperative, rubbing my hair, not too low or low. All right, depending on what you want to eat. I looked at the high school girl, and I held my head up full of pride. My boyfriend is tall, handsome and rich. What do you compare to me? Sure enough, her face immediately changed, and she shook off her boyfriend's hand, and left in a huff. Her boyfriend didn't know why, so he hurriedly chased after him, with a confused face. Conrad couldn't help but hook his lips, when he saw me smirk. What do you compare to a child? I pursed my lips. Who let her provoke me? Anna Wild. A voice suddenly came into my ears, and when I heard someone calling me, I subconsciously turned my head, but I didn't expect to see a familiar face. Mom. I was startled, and my body trembled. How could it be such a coincidence? Hello, Auntie. Before I could react, Conrad immediately greeted my mom politely. My mother was also stunned, looked at me, looked up at Conrad again, looked at it for a long time. Her eyes suddenly lit up, and asked excitedly, You kid, why are you still hiding from me when you fall in love? I realized that my hand was still holding Conrad's arm, and I immediately spread it. Mom, I was afraid that my mother would misunderstand. so I quickly explained. Mom, we are not the kind of relationship you think. But before I could finish my sentence, Conrad's mom came over and swallowed back the words I wanted to spit out. Mrs. Conrad was stunned when she saw my mother, and I could only quickly introduce to my aunt. Auntie, this is my mother. Then in the face of my mother's confused eyes, I had to bite the bullet and continue to introduce my mother. Mom, this is Conrad, my boyfriend. This is Conrad's mother. I have no confidence in saying these 4 words of my boyfriend. Mrs. Conrad and my mother seemed to see each other late, and the 4 of us sat in a private room in the hotel, and listened to the 2 of them talk incessantly and very speculatively. 8 out of 10 topics we talked about couldn't do without me and Conrad. I reluctantly turned my gaze to Conrad, but I was surprised that he listened attentively. As I watched, I began to wonder. It wasn't until my mom kept calling my name that I suddenly shuddered, and came back to my senses, looking up at her with a blank face. You kid, my mom scolded. Why are you still distracted? I just realized that they had already talked about helping us with the wedding arrangements. From meeting my mom by chance to getting married, it all happened so quickly that I was afraid that Conrad would think I had planned it. The purpose is to marry him. I had to smile awkwardly, and quickly change the subject. The summer rains are always heavy and heavy. Maybe it was the thunder, or maybe it was still some recognition. And I tossed and turned at night and lost sleep again. I fumbled for my phone from the bedside table, and asked Conrad on it. Did you sleep? He replied, no, can't sleep. I didn't answer, but walked out of the room, walked to the door of Conrad's room, knocked on it, and opened the door to see that he was still working in front of the computer. Seeing Conrad turn around, I suddenly felt a little overwhelmed, and slowly sat on the edge of his bed. My limbs stiffened. Don't take my mother's words seriously today. I'll explain it to my mom when I get home, and I won't get you in trouble. Conrad smiled suddenly, got up and walked up to me, put his hands at my sides, leaned over to me, and raised his eyes slightly. Explain what? Suddenly so close to me. I was so frightened that I subconsciously leaned back and held my breath, stared wide, and it took a long time to explain. Just explain that we are not in a relationship, boss. I never dared to take advantage of you. Unexpectedly, Conrad smiled even more happily, and pulled up a chair in front of me and sat down. Anna Wild. But I don't think there's anything wrong with being in a relationship. What? At one point, I suspected I had misheard, and watched as his eyes blinked and blinked. The heartbeat also increases violently. I'm having auditory hallucinations. The boss asked me to be his girlfriend. You don't have to rush to give me an answer. Conrad got up and walked to the hallway to stop. I'll tell you when you've thought about it. Crazy. The world must be crazy. After Conrad left, I hurried back to my room, and threw myself into the futon. The room was so quiet that only my heartbeat could be heard. Still feeling like everything was a dream, I slapped my face vigorously. The pain struck. Damn. It's true, boss. Actually let me be his girlfriend. When I woke up in the morning, I sneezed 5 times in a row, only to know that yesterday's heavy rain dropped the temperature from 26 degrees to 18 degrees. Conrad knew I wasn't wearing anything else, and handed me his sweatshirt to wear. By the way, he also boiled me a pot of porridge. Nearly 1.9 meters of people wear sweatshirts. I feel like the whole person has become smaller when I wear them. So when Conrad saw me, he couldn't suppress the smile on his lips. Come out with me to buy clothes later. These clothes don't suit you very well. I puffed out my cheeks and glared at him. Why are you laughing? Doesn't this look cute? By the time I was led to the front of a brand store by Conrad, my legs were limp. Looking up at the string of English, I swallowed hard. The boss is crazy. He doesn't think I can afford the clothes here, right? Workers are good at affordable luxury. I was just about to run away when Conrad grabbed me by the wrist, and he seemed to know what I was thinking. You pick out the clothes. I'll pay for it. So good. But the incorruptible are not subject to food, and I can't accept things from the boss for no reason. I tried to refuse, but after some theorizing, I couldn't talk about Conrad, and finally gave in. In order to show the courtesy, I wanted to reprimand him for buying him something, but he didn't want it. but he couldn't resist me, so he grabbed a tie and said, "Just give this to me." I glanced at the price. 200. My heart is inexplicably warm. When I was having dinner with my boss at noon, I opened Weshit to look at it, and it turned out that the company group without a boss blew up. Jackson, picture. Jackson, breaking news. Brothers, Celeste Russell. Oh my god, my boss has a girlfriend. Henry, is there a positive? Let's take a look. Jackson, no, I didn't see my face clearly. I was in a hurry, so I took a picture. My heart beat faster for fear they would find out about me. It's too much of a coincidence. Why is he also in City B? And why did City B happen to be so big? I shook my hand and clicked on the photo, and there was only my back and the side face of Tab Conrad, and the two of them were standing very close together, and from that point of view, it was very intimate. Without my face, I was relieved. Luckily, Jackson didn't get a picture of my face. Otherwise, it's over. But when I saw the next sentence, the heart I had just put down suddenly hung again. Celeste Russell, but why do I think this back is so familiar? Henry, remember, maybe somewhere you saw it. I rubbed my forehead, rubbed my temples, and muttered in pain. Don't recognize me. What's wrong? Tab Conrad asked. I handed my phone to Tab Conrad with a tone of frustration. We just got caught by Jackson. Tab Conrad took it, but raised his eyebrows slightly. When is the boss looking for a girlfriend? Finished. I forgot that I should have changed the group name to a note first. Tab Conrad grinned. Looks like you're all interested in my private life. It's miserable, and I accidentally saw this group by the boss. I betrayed the organization. Tab Conrad swiped the chat history in the group. The smile on the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious, and he even reached out to stroke his chin, full of interest. I was confused. Is this an interesting topic? Why are you so happy? Curiosity forced me to walk over to him, and I took a sharp breath as I saw the chat box. Celeste Russell, what about Anna Wilde? Doesn't she usually like gossip bosses the most? What about this man? Finished. Exposed. I patted my forehead in pain, watching Tab Conrad's expression change as I prayed to them to stop talking. I didn't expect my phone to ring in the next second. It's close. She's really my savior, and it's just the right time. I hurriedly took my phone to answer it, but I didn't expect a sobbing sound from the other side. My heart suddenly tightened, and I hurriedly asked, "Chloe, what's wrong?" Men are bastards. Chloe's voice was hoarse, as if she had been crying for a long time, and she cried out, "I don't want to be in love again in my life." After she finished speaking, she burst into tears again. Knowing that Chloe was still at home and worried that something would happen to her, I picked up the jacket on the back of my chair, and hurriedly said to Tab Conrad, "Boss, I suddenly have an urgent matter. I need to go back to City A immediately. Please bring my luggage with me when you come back." Unexpectedly, Tab Conrad immediately rushed to my side in 2 steps and grabbed my wrist. "I'll send you. You wait for me to pay." By the time I got to Chloe's house, it was already getting dark. When I opened the door, it was dark and smelled of alcohol. I had barely stepped on a beer can after 2 steps, and I turned on the light in the dark, only to find several beer cans rolling on the ground all over the place. I picked them up one by one and walked to the living room, only to see Chloe sitting on the floor on her elbows on the glass table, her hair messy, and a few tears on her face. "Don't sit on the ground." I tried to help her sit on the ground. She smiled bitterly at me, smiling miserably. "Anna Wilde, I'll wait for you to come and give you a taste of my private secrets. Let's get drunk today." So I drank with Chloe for a while, and I didn't leave until her mom came back from work. When I got home, the wine had not yet fully sobered up, so I decided to take a shower and sober up first. Just after blowing his hair, the phone vibrated and the screen lit up with a text message from Tab Conrad. "Are you home?" he asked. I replied with a and then he said, "Help me get my luggage over now." As soon as I saw that it was already 10 o'clock, I sent a message saying that I would pick it up myself tomorrow, and it was too late now, so let him go back and have a good rest. He continued, "I'm at your door." I finished reading it, and the next second the doorbell rang. I hurriedly opened the door, and suddenly saw that he was still a little shy inexplicably, and his cheeks were hot. He changed his shoes and walked in, drinking, Can you smell it after taking a shower? The nose is really smart. Drank a little. I'll be honest with you. Then he put his phone on the table, took his luggage and put it in the bedroom. There weren't many things, so I cleaned them up at once. I made him a cup of tea. As soon as I sat down to turn on the TV, I saw him staring at the cup for a moment, put it down suddenly, grabbed my hand and asked nervously, "Did you hurt your hand?" I was stunned. He spread my hands, and I realized that my index finger had been cut at some point, and blood was pouring out. The opening is not big, but it is not small. I blinked, looked at the wound for a moment, and said with a smile, "When did the scratch occur? I didn't actually feel it. Where's the medicine kit?" After I told him, he went to get the medicine kit without saying anything, poured hydrogen peroxide on the cotton swab, grabbed my hand and started wiping. I stared at my wound. The whole atmosphere was very quiet, and my gaze unconsciously moved up, landing on his face. His eyelashes drooped slightly, his eyes focused on my index finger, his brow furrowed slightly from time to time, as if he was afraid of hurting me. Suddenly, I felt that the boss was quite gentle. I just felt him tear off the band-aid, and help me stick it on my index finger. A sudden urge drove me, and I leaned forward, and without even thinking about it, I placed a kiss on Tab Conrad's face. Then my face was getting hotter and hotter, and I looked at him closely, but Tab Conrad didn't seem to respond and continued to wrap the band-aid around my index finger. Why didn't it happen? Am I being too impulsive? I suddenly regretted it. I gritted my teeth, a little lost, so I had to make an excuse. "I'm sorry, boss. I haven't woken up yet." Before I could finish the rest of the sentence, I saw Tab Conrad suddenly bow his head, reach out and hold my cheek, and take my lip in his mouth. My eyes were wide open, and I could clearly feel my whole body trembling, and my right hand was still hanging in the air, and I didn't react for a long time. "Boss, kiss me." It's so quiet all around. It was so quiet that only the breathing and heartbeat of two people could be heard. Ambiguous and heartbeat. He gently bit my lower lip, and I was numb from the kiss. My breath became hot, and my eyes were moist. I rolled over and sat on his lap. Then he climbed on his shoulder. His breathing became more and more rapid, and the breathing of the two people came and went, and an extremely ambiguous flame burst out, burning the air thin. I was with Tab Conrad. When I went to work in the morning, I also had the treatment of the boss personally picking up and dropping me off. Celeste Russell's first words when he came to work were, "Anna Wild, did you see the group?" I didn't react at first, and subconsciously asked, "What?" "The boss seems to have a problem." Celeste Russell's eyes lit up. "I'm curious what his girlfriend looks like. Long me like this." I was secretly smug in my heart, but I couldn't say that. I didn't know what to answer. So I casually said, "You should be pretty good looking." "I think so, too." Celeste Russell nodded approvingly. "That's not right." Celeste Russell suddenly leaned over and spun my chair to make me face her. "Anna Wild, something is wrong with you today. Very wrong." Her expression was suddenly serious, and her frank and lenient appearance of resisting strictness made me feel very weak. I swallowed. "No, what's wrong? Usually you don't hear gossip so calmly." Celeste Russell's face was full of doubts, not to mention the boss gossip. "Honestly, do you know anything?" "I really don't." I became more and more weak, and I kept begging Celeste Russell to stop asking, and if I asked again, I would be a goof. "What are you whispering?" Jackson popped out of his head and looked at me, and then at Celeste Russell. Celeste Russell and I were taken aback at the same time. "Don't be so elusive." Celeste Russell caressed his heart, and glared at Jackson with a sneer. Jackson scratched the back of his head, his face full of grievances. "It's obvious that you guys are talking too speculatively, and you don't know that I'm here." Then he immediately changed his happy expression. "A new hot pot restaurant has opened near the company, with a 7% discount. Do you want to try it?" Seeing that the topic was shifted, I hurriedly agreed to make peace. "Jackson, you're my great benefactor." In the end, the whole group decided to go to eat hot pot at noon. Not long after I said yes, Tab Conrad messaged me and asked, "What would you like to eat for lunch?" I had to tell him that I had made an appointment with my group to go to hot pot together. Not long after we sat at the hot pot restaurant and chatted at noon, Jackson inadvertently looked at the door, and then stood up suddenly. "Old Boss. We all turned around, only to see Tab Conrad push the door open, walk over to me, and sit down. All eyes were on him, eyes blinking and blinking, and the atmosphere suddenly became quiet. Tab Conrad laughed, curling the corners of his lips. Why are you looking at me like that? Not welcome. No, no, no. Jackson hurriedly called out to the waiter to add another cutlery. Tab Conrad can come and eat with us. Let us shine. The side dishes came up one after another. Everyone chatted while eating. The hot pot was gurgling and bubbling, and I looked for an opportunity to whisper, "Why are you here? I want to see you." Tab Conrad replied in a whisper in my ear. Just these 3 simple words kept tugging at my heartstrings, as if an electric current was flowing, and my face turned red. In order to relieve my mood, I took a piece of beef from the pot, dipped it in the sauce and stuffed it into my mouth. But I didn't expect it to be so spicy that I choked until I coughed. I was coughing and my face was flushed, and Tab Conrad immediately handed me the water and patted me on the back. Don't get so excited. It made my face redder, and I swallowed a mouthful of water and pushed it back. I'm not excited. After saying that, I was stunned. Wait a minute. Why is it suddenly quiet here? I looked up and saw that everyone was looking at us, eyes blinking and blinking, and Jackson's mouth opening straight in an O shape. Tab Conrad's hand is still on my back. You guys. Celeste Russell couldn't believe it. What's going on? Jackson picked up the photo on his phone and walked behind me, as if he had noticed something important. I said, why is this back so familiar? It turns out to be Anna Wild. Was discovered? Tab Conrad and I couldn't resist their questioning, and it didn't take long for us to do so. After listening to this, Celeste Russell suddenly realized. I say, why Anna Wild is not curious about this gossip at all. It turns out that she is the protagonist. You're not kind. Celeste Russell threw his elbow against my waist in dissatisfaction. This kind of good thing has to be hidden. I chuckled. Next time. Next time. After saying that, it was Tab Conrad's turn to be dissatisfied, and raised his eyebrows slightly. Do you want to have another time? I realized what I was talking about, and immediately shook my head. This weekend my mom asked me to take Tab Conrad home. Why did you buy so many things? I looked at the several bags of things in his hand, raised my hand and rummaged through them. They were all big brands. It's Muay Thai and skin care products. It cost a lot of money. Right. What is this? Tab Conrad put the things in the trunk and stroked my hair. It doesn't matter how expensive the things I gave to our parents. After listening to it, my heart warmed up, and it felt like I was in a dream. Standing on tiptoe, he dropped a kiss on Tab Conrad's face. As soon as he arrived at the gate of the compound in the family area, he was discovered by the aunts in the sharp-eyed courtyard. Anna Wild, this is your boyfriend, right? I subconsciously grabbed Tab Conrad's hand and nodded. I heard your mother say that the young man is tall and handsome, and he is about to hold your boyfriend to the sky. At first we didn't believe it, saying that there is such a good person. Looking at it now, it's really good that the young man is talented. Anna Wild was raised by us. You have to treat her well. Tab Conrad smiled. Definitely. As soon as Tab Conrad finished speaking, my mom walked out with her apron on, her head held high, and she seemed very proud. My son-in-law is here. Come on, come inside and do it. Eccentric, really eccentric. The presence of Tab Conrad made my mother so scared that her eyes were full of Tab Conrad, and she seemed to have forgotten that I was her own daughter. Thankfully, my dad remembers. Not long after I sat down, my mom dragged me to the kitchen to wash the dishes, and I vaguely heard my dad asking Tab Conrad to play chess with him. The two of them had been chatting, but the noise in the kitchen was too loud to be heard at all. It wasn't until I got in the car that I had a chance to ask him, "What did my dad talk to you about in the afternoon?" "Talk about you," he replied. "Talk about me." I suddenly became more interested. "What are you talking about me?" Tab Conrad leaned over to help me fasten my seatbelt, and his voice was very gentle. "Talk about when I liked you, and what I liked about you. Your dad said you were his only little padded jacket and wanted me to treat you well." My eyes lit up. "And when did you start liking me?" Tab Conrad hooked his lips. "Guess." I shook my head. "Can't guess. Actually, I can't say exactly when, but since last year. Your face has appeared in my mind from time to time, and when I see you, my mood will improve, and I often want to see you, my eyes crooked with a smile. And what do you like about me? Conrad laughed. I like you, silly. The emotions that had just been laid out were all gone as soon as he said this, and I snorted softly, pouted and looked out the window. But he reached out and held my face around, and his expression became serious. I like everything about you. Hearing this, my heart raced. He leaned over my lips, and deepened the kiss little by little. Because I love you, the male protagonist is extra. Not long after the company was founded, Anna Wilde arrived. When I first met her, she was wearing a long blue dress with a twist on one side, and her demeanor was generous and dignified, which instantly left a deep impression on me. At first, I thought she was a very gentle girl, but I didn't expect that after coming to the company, she would be like a living treasure. When I told her about it after I was with her, she giggled. That's just my illusion. If I'm not dignified, I'm afraid you won't dare want me. She has a good education and good ability, and she could have gone to a better company than this. When I asked her why she came here, she replied with a smile, when the company grows into a big company, I will be the elder of the company, and I want to grow with the company. I was so impressed by her words, that her words echoed in my head every time I looked up in the office and accidentally saw her. Then I couldn't help but be amused. She likes to laugh very much. Her eyes are crooked when she laughs, and there are stars in her eyes, and most of the atmosphere in the company is driven by her. And with her, everyone seems to know what exhaustion is. When the company is in trouble, she will quietly observe the mood of other people, and she can always detect when I am depressed, and then pat me on the shoulder and say earnestly, Conrad, it's not a big deal. Be happy. There are more ways than difficulties. It looks like she's my leader, but she always knows what to do and when. Before I knew it, I noticed that every time I saw Anna Wilde, I had a smile on my face. Before I knew it, I found out that I liked her. My mom kept urging me to find a girlfriend, but I didn't expect her to be in such a hurry that she put me in the blind date corner. It wasn't until Anna Wilde sent me the photo that I realized that. I clicked into the photo and found that there was a familiar name in the corner of the photo. I was amused by her. She didn't even realize that she was also posted on a blind date. I asked her to tear it up for me, but I didn't expect her to pretend to be my ex-girlfriend. And my mom found out and asked me to take her home to see it, and I suddenly thought it was a good opportunity. I pushed the boat and was ready to ask her to pretend to be my girlfriend. Hopefully, with the help of this time, she will be able to like me. I happened to pass by her desk, and heard that her mother was also urging her to find a boyfriend, and I suddenly felt that this was easy to do. She promised to pretend to be my girlfriend. I promised to pretend to be her boyfriend. This win-win approach. She should agree, and she said yes. She was very likable. She and my mom got along right away, and my mom told me she liked Anna Wilde, and told me to treat her well. I guess that's nature. Unexpectedly, when I was shopping at the supermarket, I happened to run into Anna Wilde's mother, and her mother was so happy to hear that I was her boyfriend. As my mom and Anna Wilde's mom discussed the marriage, I couldn't help but listen a little intriguedly, and I thought I had to let their thoughts go to waste. Anna Wilde was afraid that I would misunderstand her, and when she came back, she hurriedly explained to me that meeting her mother was just a coincidence, and she would make it clear to her mother when she returned. I couldn't hold back for a moment, and I lifted a chair and sat down in front of her. Anna Wilde, I don't think there's anything wrong with a relationship. She's stupid to hear. Well, silly looks cute too. I knew I couldn't rush. All I had to do was to be doubly good to her, sending her luggage, only to find that she scratched her hand. I subconsciously felt very distressed and wanted to deal with her, but I didn't expect her to kiss me suddenly. I know, she promised me. I held back the excitement in my heart, and suppressed the smile on the corner of my mouth until I helped her treat the wound, and then I couldn't hold it anymore, holding her face and kissing her on the lips. At that moment I swore that I loved her, and I only wanted to love her for the rest of my life. Then with her, get married, have children, and grow old. The end.